Good day YouTube and welcome to my channel. This is Max from MBD Developments, and today I will be continuing my video tutorial series on how to build your own website. In the previous episode I covered the basics of HTML and how to get that going, and today I will be covering the basics of styling your HTML using CSS. If you have not done any of my previous vids or my previous videos, as a matter of fact, please check it out and have a look at how to create your first HTML page, as that is what I will be working on today, or continuing with from where I left off in the previous episode. Today we'll be looking at a few more tags that will make our life easier, and these tags mostly pertain to your CSS. So first up, I'm going to dive right into those tags, get those tags set up, explain to you what they are, and then I will go deeper into CSS. Okay, if you guys can remember, for those of you that did my previous video, this is what we ended up with in my previous vid. I'm just quickly going to run through it again just to give you guys an idea of where we are. We covered the doc type, opened up our HTML, created our head, included in all the information that we needed, created the body with a couple of div tags. Now today I'm going to extend this page ever so slightly. First thing that I will be doing is in the footer. When I started working with the CSS, I had a bit of a funny thing going on there. Didn't like it much, and I didn't want to go too deeply into trying or to fix it and then trying to explain to you guys what it's all about, as I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. So all that we are going to do here is we are going to, in our footer, we are going to add another div. As you guys can remember, I explained all about divs yesterday, and there we go, and I just gave it an ID of footer top. Just want to save that. So just have a look at that piece of code again, make sure that it is all there, make sure that you have done it, that you have added that, closed that div again, and then that it continues on to the next div. When saved and we have a look at the page, you will now notice it still pretty much looks exactly the same. The only difference is we now have an extra line of text in there saying that that is the top part of the footer. Good, moving along. I'm only going to cover two other tags today. There are a bunch of these tags for all types of different purposes. Again, use Google, browse around, and you will find there are lists and lists of these tags. One thing about the next two tags that I will be mentioning, that these are two core tags. I'm only going to cover these two, and these are two core tags of CSS. Thus, these are tags that is, I want to say in brackets, pre-programmed. In other words, it's already an identifier. You don't need to identify or create an identifier or create a class or create an ID, whatever the case may be. These are just standard. So without further ado, the first one that I will be tackling is the H1 tag. H1. Open up, close up as any other tag that we will be dealing with and working with. Now that tag in itself is already been identified. What is the H1 tag? It simply means it's the header tag. In other words, it is to say that the text that I'll be placing in between these two will be a header. I'm just going to call this header logo header. Excellent. Now I'm going to do several of these. I am going to go to the content, We're going to add another one called H1, close that tag up, and this will be the content header. And I'm not going to put one in for the footer. I'm not going to put in one for the footer top, footer left, or footer right. This is just to give you guys an idea of how to style your heading. The next tag that I would like to call up and actually have a chat about is the paragraph tag. Now this tag is very similar to the H1 tag, also built into CSS. It's a standard tag, and I'm just going to place the text inside this tag. It's the P tag. It's called the paragraph tag. That is whenever you are dealing with paragraphs. And I am just going to repeat the process for all the other pieces of text that I have. Let's call that. Let's call that. It's going to save some time by just copying and pasting. Yes, that is totally doable. Just sometimes makes things a little bit faster. Excellent. So as you can see, each line of text is now within a paragraph. And now you're going to ask me, but why? Why do I have this tag? And I clearly seem to have a problem here. I'm missing a div tag, it is telling me. That's very interesting. I probably by accident deleted one of the divs. So that should be in order now. There we go, and my error is gone. And again, guys, that is just a tiny little bit of proof of how useful it is when you are using an IDE or a text editor that actually gives you a little bit of output, a little bit of feedback when you're working. I would have not picked up that problem if it wasn't for the fact that my IDE told me, listen here, you by accidentally, somewhere along the line, you deleted a tag. In this case, specifically a div tag. I'm going to get the spacing, and as you guys can see, spacing sometimes get a bit wonky. Okay, cool. So we cleaned that up. That is all clean, 100% and working now. We have got H1 tags, we've got paragraph tags, H1 tags, paragraph tags, and so forth. Right, that's the only two tags I'm going to cover. Guys, go back, have a look. There's a bunch of other tags available that you guys can use directly in your content. I'm just sticking to these two as I'm really just trying to carry across a simple concept. Good. So let's get into CSS. What is CSS? Well, CSS simply stands for a cascading style sheet. And what this means is as you put in your styles, and it will read the styles from the top to the bottom of the page. Hence the term cascading. Meaning the lower code will override the higher code if need be. I'm not going to get into that again. Check out the web. There's a bunch of examples and a bunch of things that you can read up on it. But yes, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. And its purpose is merely to style our content. With CSS, we can define things like fonts, div sizes, colors, spacings, borders, location of the div or the content on the page, or even the location of the content within a div. So yes, this is extremely powerful. This is really the core and the essence, hand in hand with HTML, to create your first web page. Also added to this, once you've got your basic HTML done and once you've got your basic CSS done, you pretty much have all the tools that you need. And going forward, up to the point where you obviously start creating dynamic websites. Cool. So how do we use CSS? There's 3 ways, actually there's 4 ways that you can use your CSS. The first way is to simply add it inside your header tag. As I mentioned yesterday, this is where all the information goes that doesn't physically get printed out, but what your HTML page actually use. The second method of using CSS is to use it in inline styling. What this simply means is that you put it directly into your tag. Your styling, you put it directly into your tag. Third method, which is the most commonly used, and you guys will see later on why, is actually to use a separate style sheet, which is merely linked into the HTML page. Thus, you're not putting all the styles in the HTML page, and you are not using it in line. The reason why this is considered the best way to do it, or to put it into a separate page, is that you can reuse that code instead of having to place the same code in each HTML page that you need. I'm not going to go into that today. That will be covered in another video. So for today, what I will be focusing on is just to give you guys an idea of CSS, how it works, and I will be sticking to the first method. I am literally going to take the CSS and place it into the head of the document. So let's do that. How do I add style sheet, or how do I add styles and style sheets to my index.html page? Again, very simple process. Surprisingly simple. Once you start getting rolling with it, works very easy. We open it up, of course, with a simple style tag. As always, when we open up a tag, we close a tag. That is the rule. So I am just going to, for the sake of spacing, I am going to do that. Anything that you place in between these two tags will get processed into your index.html file. What the style tags does, it tells it, right, the following information that I'm sending you is the styles that needs to be applied to the content of this page, to the divs, to the h1, to the paragraph tags, and so forth. Now, once we've done that, we are ready to start styling our page. And the method we do this is as follows. We say dot and then the name of the div that you wish to focus on. There's two of these that you can use, actually three, when it comes to your core styles, i.e. your h1 tags, your paragraph tags, your body tags even, then you use it just as is. I will show that a little bit later on. If it is a case where you have assigned a class to your div, you will use a dot or a full stop or whatever it may be, or whatever you may call it. In the case of an ID and it not being a class, we will be using a hash, but I will show you guys that shortly as well. So let's get into it. First up, my frame. I have decided that I am going to give my frame the following settings. I'm going to give it a width of 800 pixels, a background color of red. I'm going to give it an automatic margin on the left and an automatic margin on the right. That will allow that frame to float in the middle of the page and not off to one side. And it is done in the following manner. We have already given it dot frame to tell it, okay, I am now dealing with this class, and open and closing curly brace. Within this, we will say, okay, the first thing that we wish to do is I want to give it a width, and I wish to give it a width of 800 pixels. That is its solid width. I wish to give it a background color. See, I'm going to cheat a little bit. Background color, and my background color is red. How do I know this is red? I actually went and grabbed these hex codes a little bit earlier. If you do not know what this is, go back to Google, go Google hex colors. That is what you'll be working with most of the time. Whenever you are going to be dealing with colors within CSS, you will be dealing with the hex code. That is where programs like commercial programs like Photoshop and that comes in handy, where you can actually go pick a color and it will give you the hex code for it. In my case, I wanted red, went, grabbed that, and I've just pasted it in. The two other pieces of CSS that I would like to add is margins. I want to say on the left hand side of my page there must be a margin of auto. On the right hand side of my page there must be a margin of auto. In other words, take what I've given you and place it in the middle. It will automatically cause it to go to the middle. So if we save this and we go have a look at our HTML page, boom, we have got a red block with width of 800 pixels and it's floating in the middle of the page. Don't worry about why this header, the h1 tags, is already giving it some styling to that. That is just internal. I will be changing that shortly. My main focus being that I wish to show you guys this, that it's actually taken that frame that we have created, it's now placing it in the middle of the page. Good, going back to my editor. I am happy with that. What now? Now we move on. What is the next div that we have? The next div that we have is also, it's a class with the name of header. So how do we do this? Same procedure as the previous time. We type dot header, and for this I just wish to give it a background color of its own. If I remember correctly, this is blue, so I am just going to copy and paste it. That's perfect. Again, we are going to have a look at what is the next div. The next div is content. Again, I do not wish to do much with this. I simply want to give it a different background color so that it's just easier for me to see. That's the content, and I will be doing the same for the footer. Now with the footer, you will see I have added a few more pieces of content there, code there, just to clean it up or to tie it up a bit. What I've done is, again, I've said I wanted to have a background color. I'm specifically giving the footer a height of 100 pixels, and because I made the background a very dark color, this is nearly black, I said make the color of the text white. And it's not font color or anything like that. Within CSS, it's purely the term color, and CSS will know, okay, you are referring to the text in that footer. Great. As usual, with the save button, we refresh the page, we should be seeing something like this now, where we have taken the logo, we've given it blue, we've given the complete frame, we've given it red, my content area is green, and then obviously my footer area here is pure black. You will notice that above and below you still see some red showing through instead of it not being completely covered. That is simply due to the fact that I'm busy using paragraphs and header title tags that's got some default settings in it, but with CSS we override it, so do not worry about that too much. Our HTML and CSS is now quite nicely taking shape. That is the basics. What I am going to do is, for the sake of time, I am just going to paste 3 more pieces of code in, or 3 more pieces of CSS, and I'm going to run through it with you, explaining to you what I did. First up, all I did was gave some styling to the footer top that I've created, the footer left and the footer right. You will notice though there is one minor difference between the previous ones that I've done and the new ones, and that is, instead of using dot, I used an hash. The reasoning simply for that being that I assigned an ID to footer top, footer left and footer right. Not a class, but an ID. Thus, this will change to a hash. I know it seems something very small. However, I have numerous times in the past caught myself giving it a hash instead of a dot, or giving it a dot instead of a hash, and I couldn't figure out why my code doesn't work, and then I normally go back, have a look, and I'll pick up, oh, okay, cool, I specifically set it as an ID instead of a class. The reason behind it, sometimes that is very specific on the project that I'm dealing with, or the situation that I am dealing with. Sometimes a class works well, sometimes an ID works better. It really just depends on the situation. Great. Next thing that I did is I gave the footer left div a width of 400 pixels, the footer right div a width of 400 pixels. That is pretty self-explanatory. However, you will notice 2 more things here. That my footer, I have given it a height of 100 pixels. Obviously, that is up to you depending on what you need to do. Just for this example, I used a height of 100. But the divs inside, I did not want to have a height of 100 pixels, and I actually changed it to only a height of 60 pixels for the footer left and 60 pixels for the footer right. And below that you will notice another little CSS piece of code. That is a float. You can check it out on Google. What are floats? What do they do? What is the purpose of them in CSS? But the short summary is, a float helps me to tell the HTML page or the browser where I want this div to be. Due to the fact that it's sitting inside the footer, I told it, listen, do me a favor, take this footer left, this left div, if you will, and make sure it sits on the left hand side of my page, of my footer, inside my frame, inside my footer, make sure it sits on the left. The footer right, I said, okay, I do not want you to be on the left as well. Because if I did that, that div will slide below the footer left and it will display below it. So what I've told it to do is to float on the right hand side of the page, allowing the footer left and the footer right to be next to each other. Due to the fact that I've given both of them a width of 400, that means they will both very nicely fit in to the overall frame of 800 pixels. So let's quickly save that. I've already saved it, and let's go have a look in our browser. Reload, and there you go. You have now got the left footer there, the right footer there, displaying inline, and with that top part of the footer, and as you guys can see, the overall height of this footer, this is the complete footer from there to there, is 100 pixels, and these two have only got a height of 60 and 60. Up to this point, we are good. We have signed our divs, and we've given it some styling, something to work with, and a way for you to control your CSS. The next bit that I'm going to add specifically pertains to the header 1 tag and the paragraph tag. And let me copy it in that you guys can see what I'm talking about. And the reason why I actually left this for last is because I want to mention a few things about this. There we go. First thing that you will notice, that there is no dot, nor an ID, or anything. This is just plain H1. And the same for the P tag, the paragraph tag. And why is that? That is simply because these are built into HTML, they are built into CSS. So you do not need to tell CSS or HTML that, listen, I am now dealing with an H tag. I'm dealing with a general tag which is part of your core. Hence, no hash, no dot whatsoever. And this will take all your H1 tags, all your paragraph tags, and it will format it according to how you stated. Just a quick rundown on what I told it to do. I actually want to change this as I want you guys to be able to see the changes in the font size. So I'm going to change that just to a font of 10. And I'm going to change this to a font of 20. But essentially what I have done is I've assigned it a font family of Georgia. I'm not going to go into much into font families. There's a whole slew of information on the internet regarding font families and exactly how to use them. A lot of them actually, or a lot of, should I say, a lot of the editors out there, that when you type in font dash family, it will give you a whole list of different options of the types that you can use by default. You are able to extend it with Google Fonts and things like that, but I do not wish to get into that too much. All that I want to tell you at this point is what I've done is I've assigned it a different font called Georgia. The paragraph, I've done the same thing. Thus, all my paragraphs must use the font Tahoma and Geneva. And just a quick point on this, the reason why you do have more than one font, instead of just having Georgia or just having Tahoma, this is for the purpose of fallback. In other words, if the computer, for whatever reason, or the browser cannot detect this font, it will immediately fall back to a secondary font. The same in this case. This is very, very good practice. So always when you're doing fonts, make sure that you've always got a fallback font. But go on to Google, check it out, and you guys will see exactly what I mean and in why we're doing this. So yes, I've just assigned two new fonts, and I've just given this one a font size of 10 pixels and this one a font size of 20 pixels. Just going to save this, and if I have done this properly, you will notice that your logo header and your content header is now tiny, and it's a different font. You will also notice that the paragraph text has now all changed to a different font, to Tahoma. So that covers that. And this is pretty much how you do styling, in-page styling for HTML. This method is not very popular for a couple of reasons, and mainly it's simply being that if you're going to have more than one page, you would need to copy the whole section from style to the end of your style and copy that into each page, and as you can imagine, that can become a pain in the bum. But for this demonstration, this was the simplest, quickest, easiest way to show you guys styling. This is not incorrect, by the way. There is nothing that says you're not allowed to do your styling directly in your page. It's just a matter of making things easier for yourself in splitting it. I also want to show you guys a different method of styling. Now, I have people on both sides of the fence regarding this. I have people that say you should use inline styling, which I have mentioned in the beginning of my video. Other people say you should never use inline styling. I up till today use both, in all honesty. I will make use of my normal method, but sometimes I specifically want to drill down on a very specific div that for some strange reason I, for example, cannot get to work properly using my normal techniques of style sheet. So what I'm going to do here, I am going to scroll down. I'm going to have a look at one of these. Let's say I am going to take this footer and I'm going to make some changes to it. However, what I've decided is I'm not going to do it with my normal method. So I am going to completely remove that styling for this footer. If I remove it, I save it, and I refresh the page, you will now see that there's no styling applied to it. It's white. Obviously, this styling that you have here pertains specifically to those divs, but as you can see, the overall div has lost its color and has lost everything else with it. I'm going to go scroll down, we go back to the footer and we go, hey Mr. Footer, but you have got no styling. And we're also going to remove its name. So now it has got absolutely no name. It is just a div. If I save it, if I go back to the page, it's going to look exactly the same because it's not referenced anywhere. It's not tied to a style. It's not tied to anything. It's not even named. It's just purely a div. And as you can see, it not having a name, I'm already struggling to find it again. That's why the classing and that is so important. But let's do some inline styling. Now, pretty much what inline styling consists of is exactly as the word says. You are styling that div inline. You are not doing it in your style sheet. You are not doing it at the top of your page. You are doing it directly in this div. Method of doing this is very simple. So we've got your div. For some reason you cannot add a class or a style or an ID or anything to it other than in this div, and we will do as follow. We say div, we give it a space, and we type style equal, and we're going to put on some double quotes, and within those double quotes we will add our styles. As previously, I made the footer, I'm just looking for that piece of code, I made that footer background color, I gave it a background color of originally of black. I'm going to do the same here, space, I'm going to give it a height of 100, and I am going to change the font back to white. Let's save that, and if I did this correctly, everything is back exactly as it originally was. Top footer, left, right, background's back, and the font being white. Now that is all that inline styling is. It's instead of using it in your other pages, instead of placing it at the top of your page, you assign it directly to that div inline by using term style and then styling it, and that takes care of your styling. At this point I'm going to stop as I want to mention a few things about CSS. Number one, CSS is not worried about spacing. It doesn't care. You can put it all inline like you did with your inline styling, or you can break it out like that. In general, it is considered good practice to break it out. It just makes things neater. As you can see there, I've put it all in a low row. It doesn't look so well, so I'm just going to tab it out a bit. That looks a bit neater and a bit more aligned with the rest. That's the first thing. The second thing, after every style that you apply, you need a semicolon between each one of them, as you will see with the inline, a semicolon after each styling. Same here, semicolon after each styling. Once you've put in that semicolon in place, you can simply move over to the next line and put in your next styling, ending each one of the semicolon. So if you do find that a piece of your CSS doesn't work, the first thing that I suggest is make sure that you put in your semicolons. I myself also do have a tendency sometimes to forget it, but normally I go back. That is one of my first troubleshooting points. Great. Another thing that I would like to mention that I have preached vigorously in my previous video, I did in the beginning of the video. This time around I thought I'm going to leave it till last, but it is something very, very important, and that is comments. Comments. Always comment your code, be it HTML, be it CSS, irrelevant of what language you work in, always comment it. Now there's two methodologies in using comments. The first one being // and then your comment. That is a single line comment. Thus, if you put it in that line, it will stay there. I'm not showing it practically simply because I do not like that method. I would suggest you use the second method, which I see much more often in coding, not just my own coding, but most people's coding, is the following method. It is /*, write your comment, */. The reason why I'm suggesting this method is because it's not a single line comment, meaning that if you go prior to that end of that tag, you can actually keep typing, and typing, and I can go on forever each time going to a new line. Just have to remove this, as Studio did not know that I already had one in, and it automatically tried to add one. But the point being that if you use this method, you are actually capable of writing a paragraph. Moving over to a next line or moving over to a new line, continue typing without it disrupting your code. Also, do remember, as with most tags, as well as with almost any coding that you will do, that you do need to close it. And that concludes today's lesson on CSS. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it makes sense to you guys. I hope this helped you guys in starting to style your own HTML pages. Do note that this is not a definitive way of doing it. I have mentioned 4 ways earlier. The one way I'm not going to talk about at all whatsoever. The other 2 methods I have shown you guys today, where you put your styling in the top, in your head of your document, or inline styling. The reason why I've not moved over to the third method, and that simply being putting your styles into its own style sheet and connecting it to your HTML page, will come in the future. The reason why I didn't do it is simply in my next lessons I will be adding some more pages. I do wish to add a couple of more things, like menus, like a menu, like more pages, a bit of navigation, things like that. And once that structure is in place and it's a little bit more solid, I'm going to show you guys how to change the CSS, and how to put it into one sheet that you can actually reuse it directly in other pages instead of having to copy and paste everything. So guys, again, thank you very much. Thank you for joining me on my channel. Any comments, advice, positive criticism, please put it in the comments. It's always appreciated. I always enjoy reading these things. Even though that my channel is very new, it's always good to see some feedback from people, and especially where I myself can improve. And that is it from me. You guys must have an awesome day, and cannot wait to get my next video going to give you guys some more insight into HTML and CSS. Have a great day.